Hey and welcome to the channel of ThatBurringGuy, and I'd like to remind you that this video is marked as REUPLOAD because it is a translation of practically the same video that was published in autumn 2020 on my channel for Russian-speaking audience. And if you'd like to see my latest artworks or get access to the WAV files of my tracks, you can subscribe to my Patreon and get many other gifts as well. So let's move to the topic of our video, and today I'm going to tell you about how I draw hair. I will explain everything step by step, and as an example I will take my artworks of Neferpitou from Hunter x Hunter. And it's a bit funny and ironically because basically this is the very first artwork where I used this drawing method. But despite that, it remains my favorite one and I think it's one of the best. The video track was taken from a last year's stream, during which I made this hair. So here's a brief spoiler of how the hair will look like, and step 1. Everything starts with the basement, so you create a new raster layer and draw a plain shape of your hair. The shape should be solid but not 100% straight, so I recommend picking some watercolor brush. If you're working in Clip Studio Paint just like me, you can pick the dense watercolor brush. It is a standard brush that comes with the program. I'd like to emphasize the fact that this is an actual basement of your hair, so if you need a sketch, it should already be prepared. Once you have prepared the basement, create a new layer with multiply preference, and using the same brush and the same shade, start drawing the edges of the curls. On this stage you should not try to make something beautiful. Do not try to draw 100% accurate shadows or to make the volume of the hair. Right now we're simply adding the guiding edges. Once you're done, create another multiply layer and practically do the same thing. But this time, aside of emphasizing the edges, try adding the first texture of your hair. By the texture, I mean the smaller strokes that you're adding to the curls, as on the video. Yeah, my method of drawing hair is really simple. It is extremely simple, to be honest. Though it might be a bit methodical, meaning you'll have to repeat the same things and actions multiple times. However, you don't need to know some complicated techniques or functions of the program. The only things you need are several layers and a certain brush for blurring, but we'll talk about it on the later stages. And speaking of methodical actions, create another layer with multiply preference and repeat the same action, emphasizing the texture even more. However, this stage slightly depends on how you were working with the previous layer. For example, if on the second multiply layer and the first one with the texture itself is quite big and doesn't leave much unpainted space, then on the third multiply layer you should make the texture smaller, so it will give a shade to the previous texture. And if the first texture that you added is quite small and you still have a big unpainted space, then make the next one bigger than the previous one, so you will still have this shading effect. Once again, you can follow my actions on the video. You are free to use as many multiply layers for shading and texture as you please. I am usually satisfied with 3 or 4. Next I pick a special brush for hair blurring. If you're working in Clip Studio, you can copy its name from the description and find it in the Clip Studio assets so you could download it. So for more convenience, I duplicate all the multiply layer I created, make the original ones invisible, and merge the copies. If you're sure that you won't need the original ones, you can simply select all of them, right-click and press Merge Selected. And now I simply start blurring the hair. This stage is also really simple, you only need to blur the hair along its growth line. Simply pay attention to the borders and the texture that we added. And I would advise to start drawing your hair with grey shades only. With grey palette it is much easier to find the initial balance of the colors. And if on the later stages you're not satisfied with the balance, the contrast, etc., you can always change everything in the edit menu. Also, despite this is just the basement, you must already know where your light source is located. This will help you while blurring, because thanks to this, you will know where you should blur more, or where you should leave the shadows darker and more visible. Yes, you should also blur the outer edges of the hair. This is a completely line artless method of drawing. The further we proceed, the more every single action depends on the situation. For example, here, at the mid of the process, I decided to emphasize the borders of the curls even more, and so I created another multiply layer. You don't have to follow this step. This decision was completely mine just because I felt like it. The shadows by the end of the curls were approximately the same as in the middle, which is not really good. And I prefer high contrast, which has also led to this decision. During the process, you are free to add your own elements and use your own techniques if you think that they'll improve the result. Here, for example, I'm adding an additional strong gradient, because this part of hair is behind Pitou's neck and the light source won't reach it. On the new layer with multiply preference, and yes, it should have already become your favorite preference, I pick the standard mechanical pencil and add separate hairs. In this way we increase the detailization of the hair. Upon that you are free to blur them a bit or leave the hairs as they are. And as I mentioned, I love high contrast. That is why I create a new layer with add glow preference, yeah, not multiply anymore, and start adding strong, bright glares. But please be advised, these glares should be there only if a strong light source was the part of your composition from the very beginning. And even if you decided to add it right now, don't leave your hair the only object that has these strong glares. Add them to the skin, clothes, etc. Of course, only if the material of an object would allow such strong glares. And I would say that you should be quite cautious when you add such strong light. The edges of these light zones should be sharp. However, you should also blur them enough with the texture blur brush, so they would look like a natural part of the hair. Also, depending on the exact location of your light source, you should add these glares to the edges of the hair. It might seem like a small though beautiful detail, but it emphasizes the volume of the hair. Create another layer with add glow, glow dodge or color dodge preference, and using an airbrush, add such a misty, blurry light effect on top of the glares. You are free to use any of the three mentioned preferences. I used Add Glow this time because it is stronger than Color Dodge and it can be seen on the black background. However, I think that Color Dodge is the most beautiful one, so it is up to you whether to choose it or not. I also created another Add Glow layer and added the same strong glares to the edges of the hair that are on the opposite side from the light source. And because they are on the opposite side, I chose Add Glow preference instead of the Glow Dodge that was used for the main glares. Add Glow is slightly less strong than Glow Dodge and not that glowy. So in this way we once again emphasize the power of the light source, but also show the distance from the light source and that the light from it actually bends around the hair. Once again, this is a great and simple way to show the volume. Now do some corrections. Just make sure that everything that you did satisfies you, and then proceed to the next stage. Once you're ready, get back to your main layer, the one with the basement color and the shadows, and go to the Edit Tonal Correction panel. With this palette, and especially with the brightest contrast, hue saturation luminosity, tonal correction and gradient map panels, you can customize your shades, color and chiaroscuro balance. And once you're done changing the shade, you just need to look at your work once more and think of what might require some changes, some corrections and so on. For example, after I started changing the color of the hair, I added another multiply layer and emphasized the shadows even more. Now it is only up to you, you can add some more additional hairs to emphasize the detailization or blur some places if you think that the texture is too noticeable. And once again, here's the result. To be honest, I love this sketch of Neferpitou. And yes, it is still on the stage of sketch, but one day I'll definitely finish this artwork. And here are some of my latest works where I also used this technique. So as you can see, everything is truly simple. You just need to spend an hour or two to get used to the techniques and to the method. And if you were training and drawing something during my guide, I would be really happy to see what results you achieved. You can send me your artwork to any of the pages in the description. And don't forget that there are plenty of prizes waiting for you on my Patreon page. So, thank you for your time and I wish you a great inspiration.